The Glorious Bird by Gerard CArson. Although some of the stories about Old Abe may have been exaggerated, no one questions the fact that he performed his patriotic duties well. As you read this essay, note how Gerard CArson interweaves historical information with legend. From time immemorial, birds have been held in particular esteem as omens and as totems, especially the eagle, whose soaring flights were interpreted in Homer's Odyssey as signs of events yet to come in human affairs. And the eagle has been the symbol of St. John the Evangelist, of imperial Rome, and of other proud empires that have since risen and passed away. In our own American annals, no individual member of the zoological world can rival Old Abe, the Wisconsin Civil War eagle, in the nation's affections, although one might get an argument in favor of Jumbo, P.T. Barnum's celebrated elephant, or of a magnificent shaggy American bull bison whose name may or may not have been Black Diamond, and whose home was probably, but not certainly, New York's Central Park Zoo. The bison was real, all right, but the high regard in which he was held was due in part to an unfair advantage. He represented money, since his profile appeared on the reverse of the buffalo nickel. But on to our eagle, who was, after all, designated our national bird in 1782. Early in 1861, at sugar-making time, a Chippewa Indian named Chief Sky captured a young bald eagle at the headwaters of the Flambeau River near the line between Wisconsin's Ashland and Pierce counties. Finding a large tub-like nest of mud and sticks in a tall pine, the Indian felled the tree amid the screams and menaces of the parent birds. A few weeks later, when the Flambeau band moved south to dispose of baskets, furs, and moccasins, Chief Sky carried the young bird to Eagle Point. There, a farmer named Dan McCann acquired the bird, now nearly grown and handsome, for a bushel of corn. McCann, in turn, took the eagle to Eau Claire, where members of the Eau Claire Badgers, later Company C of the 8th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry, chipped in to buy the appealing raptor for $5, although another account says the price was $2.50. The captain of the company gave the bird the felicitous name Old Abe in compliment to President Abraham Lincoln. Old Abe was formally sworn into the service of the United States in a ceremony that included placing red, white, and blue ribbons around his graceful neck and a rosette of the same colors on his breast. A new rank, Eagle Bearer, was created, and a soldier was detailed to carry the eagle beside the regimental colors on a special perch. Little flags made by two patriotic ladies were placed on each side when the regiment was on the march. The bearer wore a belt with a socket to receive the butt end of the staff. The pole was about 5 feet long, which made it possible to carry the eagle 3 feet above the heads of the men. This, a member of Company C recalled, made him quite conspicuous. Early in September 1861, the Eau Claire Eagles, formerly Badgers, boarded the steamer Stella Whipple with banners flying. People shouted and wept as they paid farewell to the young recruits departing for the war. The little steamer carried the soldiers downriver to the Mississippi, where it was made fast to the levee at La Crosse. There, the 1st Wisconsin Battery boomed a salute. As the spectators shouted greetings, the war eagle was carried proudly above the line of march. The color bearer and the eagle bearer heading the column, the colors on the right, eagle on the left. At this time, an offer for Old Abe, the first of many, was made and refused. The bird could not be bought, even for $200 in cash. The company traveled by rail from La Crosse to Madison to join the regiment forming at Camp Randall, moving briskly at the quick step past the Capitol building to the gates of the camp. At that moment, Old Abe became a celebrity. As the men of the 7th Wisconsin lined up on each side of the entrance to greet the new men of the 8th, and the band played Yankee Doodle, the majestic bird cast an eye on the American flag floating above him, seized its starry folds in his beak, and spread his wings to their full extent, 6.5 feet. It was an irresistible tableau vivant. The crowds went wild when they grasped the symbolism. Our national bird, the bird of freedom, aligning the natural world with the Union cause. Omen, indeed. At the time, old Abe weighed about 10.5 pounds. His breast was broad and heavy, his body symmetrical with a white tail, well-rounded. He had a large, well-developed head, bright yellow legs, and talons sharp as grappling irons. The plumage was brown with hints of gold, the greater part of the neck a snowy white, the iris of the eyes a brilliant straw color, the pupils a piercing black. For this splendid creature, a new, more elaborate round wooden perch was designed. At each end were clusters of golden arrows, and underneath the crossbar a shield with painted stars and stripes was attached. Below there appeared the legend 8th Regiment W.V. A leather ring was attached to one of the eagle's legs, with a stout cord about 20 feet long. On a march or during a battle, the eagle bearer took in the slack, giving the bird a free play of about 3 feet. The 8th Wisconsin was assigned to the Western Theater of War, where it did railroad guard duty, manned rifle pits, and engaged in a number of skirmishes. On various occasions it took heavy casualties, being under heavy fire at the battles of Farmington and Corinth, the capture of Island No. 10, the assault on Jackson, Mississippi, the siege of Vicksburg. It took part in the Red River Expedition, and later, toward the end of its period of enlistment, in the 2-day battle at Nashville in 1864. The Eagle was in the thick of it all, carried high on all marches, present at every battle in which the 8th was engaged, spreading his wings when he heard the bugle calls, and screaming through the smoke and roar of battle. At Corinth, according to one version of the story, old Abe's cord was cut by a bullet, and the War Eagle soared high above the battle, even dropping rocks upon the rebel forces. This may be carrying anthropomorphism pretty far, but it is a fact that the phenomenon of war, the drums and rattle of musketry, and the roar of cannon did excite the bird, and the rest is, well, a matter of what you want to believe. At any rate, the eagle undoubtedly lifted up the spirits of a whole regiment, and he survived. Once he wavered in the sky, but a solicitous examination showed that only a few tail feathers had been shot away. Like old soldiers, old Abe found that in war there is more waiting than fighting. When in quarters, Abe was allowed a good deal of freedom. He amused himself catching bugs, fishing in a creek, tipping over water pails, stealing baseballs, sneaking into the sutler's tent for dainties. Old Abe never forgot a grudge and punished any soldier foolish enough to get fresh with him. In general, he was as independent as a hog on ice. Abe disliked dogs, except for Frank, the regimental dog, who brought in rabbits, squirrels, rats, and mice. As a gourmet, however, his preference was for Confederate chicken, which seemed to agree with his constitution remarkably well. Once Abe discovered a cup of peach brandy and swallowed it, thus rounding out his military experience by finding out what it was like to be drunk. A furlough home enabled the War Eagle to celebrate the 4th of July, 1864, in Chippewa Falls, and the Wisconsin State Journal noticed that he had put on weight and acquired dignity and ease of bearing, the impersonation of haughty defiance. The Eagle participated in his final battle at Hurricane Creek, Mississippi in the late summer of 1864. At the time he was mustered out of service, P.T. Barnum, the great showman of the age, made an unsuccessful bid of $20,000 for the sacred bird. Governor Lewis received the bald eagle as an honored charge of the state. A large, eerie cage in a special room was prepared for old Abe in the Capitol building, and he was given life, Tennessee in his quarters, and the right to draw rations in perpetuity. On nice summer days, Abe, with his attendant, enjoyed the freedom of the Capitol grounds under the shade of venerable oak trees. But old Abe's career was not over. he still had public duties to perform as a civilian. He was in demand as a star feature of sanitary fairs to raise money for medical care for soldiers and encampments of the Grand Army of the Republic. Where the boys cheered, marched, ate hardtack and sow-belly, sang Civil War marching songs, and cheered for old Abe while he cheered back after his fashion. On these occasions, devoted to nostalgia and charity, Abe lent a photograph or a tail feather worth $10 to raise funds for sick and wounded veterans. At a great fair in Chicago, for example, in 1865, the Eagle raised about $16,000. In fact, in a souvenir book written about old Abe, the author explained in a note that the volume was prepared to furnish a means whereby a few veterans maimed in the service of their country might turn an honest penny. 1876, the centennial of American independence. It goes without saying that old Abe attended the great centennial exhibition in Philadelphia, the first of our great world's fairs in the United States. Abe was one of the chief attractions during that centennial summer, feted especially on Wisconsin Day. Standing on the national escutcheon, supported on a lofty pole, he behaved with the dignity of a hero of some 42 battles and skirmishes. Crowds were always at hand, and the bird surveyed the animated scene around him, as historian of the exposition wrote, with an air of royal majesty. Old Abe's death and glorification were spectacular and fully consistent with his extraordinary life. He didn't peg out until March 1888, when a paint and oil smudge fire in the Capitol basement created a suffocating volume of oily smoke. The Eagle was rescued, but never recovered from smoke inhalation, refused all food, and died on March 26, 1881, in the arms of his keeper. A gracefully posed image of the bird was preserved by the art of taxidermy and displayed in the Capitol War Museum until February 1904. Then another fire swept through much of the museum, this time destroying all that remained of old Abe. "The vision ends," wrote an amateur poet, "and we will leave him there, and trust in God with faith and earnest prayer, that victory's dream be fully realized and all the world be nobly eagle-eyed." Old Abe's memory endures. Today, on State Highway 178 in Wisconsin, approximately 8 miles north of Chippewa Falls and the Chippewa River, a historical marker commemorates the glorious bird at a wayside that is part of the old McCann farm, and an oil portrait by an unknown artist hangs in the state capitol in Madison, Wisconsin. It perpetuates a legend, yes, not of Paul Bunyan, school of unnatural natural history such as the Black Hodag, subject of many tall tales, but an affectionate legend, mostly true, based upon verifiable fact.